Newcastle have made a bid for Benjamin Šeško, we believe, in the region of 80 million euros with 10 million euros add-on. RB Leipzig are happy with it. Benjamin Šeško yet has to decide where he wants to go. It's a shootout between Newcastle and Manchester United.
Yeah.
If you are Šeško, you're 22 years of age, you're looking at both projects. What's the better project for you?
Newcastle, I think, because Newcastle comes with expectation, but doesn't come with the same pressure that Man United comes from. You know, whilst people focus on Newcastle, and they focus on it because Newcastle makes a lot of noise, because it's a very passionate football club and the fans are very motivated by it, it doesn't have the day-to-day scrutiny that Man United has. It doesn't matter what happens. You can fart in the corridor of Man United and it's heard around the world. It's not the same at Newcastle.
It's a very interesting analogy.
Yeah, but you know what I mean in terms of what people focusing and really dialing into what happens at Man United. You've got Ruben Amorim that's presiding over a 12-year decline of Manchester United and trying to, and ocean liners don't turn fast, he's trying to correct it, and I think he's making lots of missteps, but then we probably all would if we were in his shoes. Whereas Newcastle, despite the frustrations around Isak, despite the frustrations of people perhaps using it as a stepping stone club, and they might not like to hear that, but it is a reality. I don't think you lose very much by going to Newcastle. You go there, you're playing on a side that's ambitious, but is a step below the radar. You go and perform at a high level, the opportunity comes again, and it might come at a different stage in Man United's evolution. If I'm a centre forward that can get past the notion that going up to the northeast of England isn't as appealing as going to Manchester, and by the way, Newcastle is a beautiful town, and this idea that this north-south divide and everybody up in the north doesn't have an understanding of culture and sophistication is rubbish. It's a brilliant town. Yeah. So if I were in his shoes, if the economics of the deal were that I wasn't being compromised financially by going to Newcastle over Manchester United, I think it's a great move. I think Eddie Howe, is a brilliant manager. I had my reservations about him in the past. I've had conversations with Eddie. I like him very much, and I think he's done a brilliant job. And I think that the opportunity to go to Newcastle at this stage in Newcastle's evolution, and there's so many things afoot. We're going to talk about the transfer system perhaps being broken down. PSR's getting a buck coach and horses driven through it. Who knows what will happen in the next 12 months as to what Newcastle might be able to do, because we know that if Newcastle are let off the reins, there's no restrictions upon how much finances they can bring to bear if they choose to. So I would be looking at Newcastle rather than Man United, and Man United fans can
Why
deal
is
with
he
that.
stalling? If you're Šeško, why?
Because
if you're Newcastle, you're like, make up your mind. Do you want to come to us or not? Why are you stalling?
Because the agents are in the mix of it. There's only one thing worse than no choice, is having too much choice. Yeah. And sometimes, teams get picked and they're down to the bare bones, and actually they perform better than having too much choice. In this instance, it's a career move. It's a life decision. He's probably finding himself in a situation where there's lots of different voices in his ear with lots of different reasons for being there. And there is always the lustre of Man United, irrespective of whatever toxicity exists around the perceived position of Man United. And it's not perceived. They finished in the bottom 5 of the table last year and stunk it out periodically and repeatedly. And so whilst you've got this in your ear, it's Man United, Man United, Man United. On the other side of the equation, the reality of Man United is this isn't Man United that once upon a time occupied this top table. This isn't Man United that's finding its way to get anywhere near getting some of the crumbs off the top table.
Indeed. This one's coming from Dan. Question to you, Simon. Morning, gents. Question, please. Does the modern footballer look at social media footprint when choosing a destination, i.e. Newcastle versus Manchester United?
Ask them. I would think so. I mean, we heard Man United come on here. Man United talking about how they build and bend their social media representations and how they encourage players to think a certain way and saying certain things in press conferences based upon what they've seen trend on social media.
It's crazy. That is crazy.
Who doesn't grown-ups don't, but who doesn't look at social media and form some degree of opinion upon something based upon social media? All that social media are doing is filling the gap that traditional media once did, and what mainstream media are doing now is colouring in the picture a little bit. Social media creates the narrative, creates the talking points, does some of the research and creates the conspiracy theories. And then traditional media comes along and colours in the picture. But I would imagine, absolutely, footballers, they spend how many times have we been told by incumbent managers or people involved in the game currently that they are telling footballers not to look at their phones, not to come off at half-time or at the end of a game, read what people have said about them? How many times are we hearing people being aware of unpleasant and discriminatory things being said? And reacting to it? We've just seen an example of it with Jess Carter in the Women's Euros, that they're seeing this kind of content. So, of course, they're going to be privy to it, both good and bad. Yeah. All right, let's go to the phone lines. Phone lines open right now, 03717 223344. We are talking RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Šeško and where he should go. Let's go to Jack, Manchester United fan. Jack, obviously, you're going to say he should come to your club, but why?
I don't think United needs Šeško right now. Sorry, lads. How are you guys? I hope you're okay.
We're good. You saying you don't think United need him?
No, I don't think United need Šeško at the moment, at this time of the project with Ruben Amorim, especially with the two players they just bought in with Cunha and Mbomo. I think they need a Premier League striker with them, like Watkins, like that we were going for, or Mateta, and something to just steady the ship, get you in Champions League spots for the next few years, and then you can go for a proven striker if you ever make it back again, as you said before we went on a break, back to where Man United was, or at least around the top four. But
I couldn't agree more. I think there are proven Premier League strikers that we know score goals in the Premier League that I think would fit in with United straight away. I'm shocked that no one's actually even put Mateta in the conversation at Crystal. I think he's done a great job. Ollie Watkins, we know, has done a good job as well for Aston Villa. Why always the big thing to go and look abroad when you do have proven Premier League strikers who will cost a lot cheaper than 80 million euros?
With due respect, it's one thing playing for Crystal Palace and hitting a great run of form, which he has done for about a year now. Prior to that, he wasn't as prolific. He was struggling, and maybe just the component parts of the team were different. And you would have felt with people like Wilfried Zaha on the side, he might have scored more goals. But the fact is, he didn't, and he's become far more compelling in the last 12 months. As a result of his relationship with Glasner. You can make the argument, if Man United, if you were saying to this fellow on the call now, would you sign Isak? I bet you'd say yes, because but he wasn't a proven Premier League striker 3 years ago. He landed straight in Newcastle's side and hit the ground running. So this kid may well do the same. Man United need a striker. Clearly, I mean, we've had discussions about Man United and talking about the argument that Neil Warnock brought into the studio about 3 or 4 weeks ago, is that he feels that Amorim should build from the back. And then Sam Matterface was pulling stats out of his backside, left, right and centre, as he does, about the fact that Man United don't concede goals. They can't score goals. Man United's problem is they can't score goals, and clearly Rasmus Højlund, has got a 50p head. You're not going to get much from him. That die's being cast.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah.
And and unless there's going to be some miraculous sea change in what Højlund does, he isn't going to be the answer. So bringing somebody in just because he's, the age-old expression, a foreign player. If you had a plethora of centre forwards in the Premier League that were of a high quality, and Watkins is all right. I like Ollie Watkins. He's a good player. He played well for Brentford. I liked him at Brentford. I think he's a decent player. He's had a couple of swipes at me, but tongue-in-cheek swipes about the fact that I didn't think he was going to be a problem for Arsenal when Aston Villa played against him last year, and he went up there and scored. Took great delight in rubbing my face in it, and fair play to him.
Yeah.
And I like him a lot. Yeah. But I think there's a vast difference between even an Aston Villa and Man United, because Aston Villa, whilst a big football club and one I admired, and I used to get on very well with Doug Ellis back in the day when he was the chairman and owner of Aston Villa, I still think that Man United would benefit from somebody that's a very energetic and progressive striker rather than somebody that's at a certain level already. Yeah. I understand the argument, though.
Yeah. Again, texts are flying in here. This one's coming from Lee. Šeško should just look at the recent history of players signed by each club and their development. Isak, Hall, Livramento, Hype have all improved their game and status. Mount, Garnacho, Sancho, all struggling to find somebody to buy them. Interesting. Let's go to Sam, Newcastle fan. Sam, look, it looks like Isak is going. Šeško could be the man to replace him. Why hasn't he chosen you as yet? You put a bid in. What's the hold up, do you think?
Well, I certainly think that the hanging off the coattails of Manchester United's past success looks very tempting for international players, and I really do understand that. But you've only got to look at the statements from the players that have suddenly left Manchester to understand what's going on at the club. It's in the news, it's in the tabloids, it's all over, and not to mention their league position last season. Newcastle United, we want to talk about the project, the exciting project that they had, but that, even for me as a Newcastle fan, has gone off the boil a bit. But if we boil it down to the facts, Eddie has a great reputation for improving players, getting them into international squads, and I'm sure we'll talk about it anyway, but look at what we've done for Isak. We took a chance on him a lot in a very, very similar situation to Šeško. We took a chance on him, and look where he is now, the best striker arguably in the world currently, looking to go for record bids.
Yeah, look, Newcastle fans would be upset with the Isak situation, and rightly so. Who wants to lose their best players? But ultimately, you could end a transfer window with Šeško and Visser up front. I mean, look, you still want to keep Isak, obviously, but it's not bad replacements to get a man in Visser who scored, 19 goals for Brentford, and Šeško, everyone's talking about as one of the best strikers in the world.
Yeah, Yeah, well, listen, for me, Šeško, he's very young, 22-year-old player, great sort of physicality and pacing, technical ability. Given what Eddie's done with players already, there's certainly a greater ceiling to be reached with him and improvements that I think we could make and certainly give him those opportunities. Plus, we've got Champions League this season, which is another great pull for the club. So I think he would obviously be biased, but I think he will be better off at the project at Newcastle United. You know what? This transfer window has been a nightmare for Newcastle fans. You know, we heard statements from Eddie. He wanted to get out the gates early, get players in, get them in for pre-season. That hasn't happened. We're on skeleton staff at the moment. 2 directors of football have gone. Our CEO, God bless him, is very, very ill. We're just starting to hear about those replacements coming in now. So our recruitment has been one deal at a time. We've heard that directly from the club. So we're getting to a point now where we just need to throw the yen at people, get players in and get cracking with the next season.
Let's talk Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace have obviously their case with CAS coming up, or the UEFA that's going to CAS coming up. Crystal Palace have been drawn in their Conference League games. They'll either take on Norwegian side Fredrikstad or Michelin of Denmark. What was funny, actually, well, not funny, but Crystal Palace on their social media channels posted this draw. And you're like, do you want to be in this draw or not? Clearly you don't want to be. Why are you posting? The post was quickly taken down as well. Why did they post it? Someone in their social media team is going to get...
I don't know. Why did they take it down? I mean, at the moment, they are in the Europa Conference. I would say...
Yeah, but you don't want to be in.
Well, I know they don't, but I mean...
That's where they are currently.
Yeah. Why did they take it down then, as you said?
I don't know. I mean, look, we just got to see how it plays out. There's a piece reported in the Times yesterday which refers to a couple of documents that they've got hold of that they clearly believe are transformational to their case at CAS. They relate to slightly different rules being applied potentially to Nottingham Forest.
Two-tier UEFA.
And potentially messages that were given by the ECA, the European Clubs Association, that never got to Crystal Palace because Crystal Palace weren't part of the ECA. And now, I think the problem with both of those ideas as being ways in which they can undermine the UEFA decision. The problem with both of them are that it would have made no difference to Crystal Palace. And in fact, John Textor admitted it in this very studio that it would have made no difference. So it's very hard to understand how they think that those will be the things that will overturn the decision.
Does it set fire to Nottingham Forest, though?
Well, I don't think so, because Nottingham Forest, according to those documents, Nottingham Forest did nothing wrong. Those documents suggest that Nottingham Forest were able to extend the time period from the 1st of March to the 29th of April with the consent of UEFA. So what have Nottingham Forest done wrong in that scenario? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to me to undermine Nottingham Forest case.
But haven't Forest changed again? Didn't Marinakis create a situation, then uncreate it?
Well, yeah, because they weren't in... There wasn't a conflict, so he could come out of his blind trust. But again, that seems to me to be reasonable. If he doesn't need the blind trust, then he can come out of it. Yeah. There is a question, I think, a fair question, as to why that was all processed at the end of April rather than on the 1st of March, if that was the rule. Mm-hmm. But it's a point that goes nowhere in circumstances where Crystal Palace didn't take action to try and pursue the end of April rule. They have said, we didn't need to take action because we weren't part of a multi-club. We didn't even think about it. And in any event, we wouldn't have done it anyway. That's their position.
Wouldn't Palace argue that dates have been changed and moved for Forest and not for them?
The point is, there's nothing to say that the approach taken with Nottingham Forest wouldn't
be available to Crystal Palace.
Correct.
Yeah. But they didn't ask for it.
They didn't ask
for it because, according to them, they weren't aware of it. So I just don't know where the point goes. They think it's a very strong point, so I could be completely wrong. The fact that they've leaked it out to the press, I think suggests that they think these are two absolutely critical documents to their case. It also hints, potentially, that they don't believe that their arguments in relation to decisive influence, which is the core of why they've been demoted, it could be that they don't believe that the core of those arguments against decisive influence are strong in themselves, so that they can't unpick UEFA's position on decisive influence. Now, I would say if that is the case, again, it makes it harder for them to win at CAS.
Maybe part of this argument, or separate to it, again, it'd be interesting to get your points, is this now rumoured relationship between John Textor and Marinakis. Does that have any bearing on this, or should it be looked at?
Look, there's
different reasons.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's very strange that if there is this relationship that is going to be formalised with Botafogo going forward, it's very odd that it would come out into the media this week. Yeah. Of all weeks, it's a very, very strange situation that they themselves would be happy for it to come out. There's been very unusual deals, shall we say, between Nottingham Forest and Lyon in particular, and also inbound from Botafogo into Nottingham Forest. We've all seen those. Niakate last season and Mangala. I mean, Mangala was a player who was on loan. They then crystallised the purchase and then immediately loaned him to Everton, Lyon, last season. That was a very, very unusual transaction. And of course, the two transactions, the £25 million for Mangala and the near £30 million for Niakate, clearly was very important for Nottingham Forest's PSR position. So they've obviously had relationships. Now, the sort of...
Your smile there, Simon's almost given away without talking. You're saying a lot without saying anything.
I'm listening to Stefan. I don't think there's any doubt that there's a relationship between Marinakis and Textor, and how that relationship manifests. I think they're like-minded people. I think they have like-minded outcomes in mind. And I would be surprised if we don't see that manifest itself.
But the dealings are unusual. I mean, if you look at also the goalkeeper situation. So
the Lyon goalkeeper.
No, the Nottingham Forest goalkeeper, the American.
Matt Turner.
Yeah. So Turner goes to Lyon this summer for I think €8 million. Yeah. They then, under new management at
rescind the contract. Can't do it
at Eagle. Yeah. They want to back out. They can't back out because
it's done.
Yeah. And so they loan him immediately off to the US.
Daniel Levy has had a fascinating conversation with Gary Neville. He's criticised the length of time it's taken for the Premier League to investigate Man City's alleged 115-plus charges. This is what Daniel Levy, the Spurs chairman, had to say about how long the case has taken.
I think it would be really unfair of me to talk about another club within the Premier League. All I would say, it's going through a process which I think has gone on for far too long. And it needs to be brought, for the good of the game, to a conclusion. But I think it was the FA that should have brought us all together. I agree, it's unfortunate that we haven't managed to resolve things internally rather than, really the recourse to the lawyers, because the lawyers are going to earn a lot of money out of this.
It is interesting there, because it does say a lot, but then also doesn't say very much as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was, the whole thing was a bit like that. I mean, I think for Spurs fans in particular, he said almost nothing and showcased the stadium that we've all known about for the last 5 years. I mean, it's not just opened. So I thought it was a bit of a bizarre interview. No, but it just didn't get to anything. We had Gary Neville's sort of interesting bits about the football regulator, but even that was based on false references to budgets and things. I mean, they talked about the independent football regulator having a budget of £40 million a year.
That's not true.
And how that wasn't going to be enough. Well, it's a quarter of that.
Yeah, it's 10 million.
I mean, it's 10 million a year. So how they think this football regulator is going to all of a sudden change everything with £10 million a year is a bit surprising.
I think the new chair is an interesting character. I think he's a solid individual, David Cogan.
I thought he was fantastic in his interview in the select committee. I think they are very lucky to have somebody of his credentials and calibre as the chair. Yep. So at least they've got that.
Yep.
And even that, the government almost screwed that up by making it political. Mm-hmm. And this is part of the problem in having government involvement in a regulator.
Absolutely.
Is that you have political influence,
yes,
even where you've got the best possible person that you could reasonably expect to be the chairman.
Absolutely.
But I mean, just in terms of
Levy.
what Levy said about the City situation.
Well, we've been saying, isn't it? We know the process has taken too long.
Yes, of course, but it's a bit rich for one of the instigators and the complainants that I suspect started the whole process around the case.
Yeah,
it's a bit rich to then complain about the length of the process.
No, that's not right. I mean,
hold one thing to start it, but there's another thing to say speed it up.
No, that's not right. And the fact that Tottenham and Levy might have been one of the leading voices that felt that these things should be investigated doesn't mean that the process shouldn't be better.
Well, sort of, except you have to understand what you're alleging. So if you go round, I mean, look, there's different ways of managing the case, I think, which is the point you're making, and the point that I assume.
And the point we made the other day about the engagement of the independent panel and the timelines they should work in.
So fair enough, manage it in a different way, but you are talking about something which, in any situation, is going to take multiple years.
Oh, agreed.
Right? So there's no way around that.
Agreed.
So if you wanted, as Daniel Levy seems to be suggesting, if you wanted a process that was going to be kept very tight, investigated behind closed doors, and then negotiated either by the FA, although I don't really understand what the angle is for the FA, and then investigated and settled.
Well, you're talking about regulation and governance of the game, and he really there.
Okay, so if you wanted it done in that way, behind closed doors, then unfortunately the rules are not set up at all for dealing with situations like that. So we've seen even admitted cases take a long time. Look at the Chelsea situation with these off-book payments. Yep. That situation has been ongoing, I think, for 3 years since they admitted it themselves. So that there's no question of whether they did it. They say they did it, and yet we still don't even have a charge. So if that's charged, there's then a process, presumably another, 6 months, 1 year. So that in itself is going to go on, and that's a situation that's been admitted. The reality is, in all of these sorts of situations, if you have and you go round making allegations of serious wrongdoing by individuals and by clubs, you have to allow the process to take the time to fully investigate and to prosecute any charges. It's just the nature of the beast.
I do want to get your take on another thing he said in that interview, although you said it wasn't the greatest thing. He also claimed that related party sponsorship is one of the biggest threats, as clubs that are owned by nation states can do deals with themselves. Again, not quite correct, maybe the wording of it, but he's got a point there. You look at the situation with Darwin Núñez, obviously being sold to a PIF club in Al Hilal, and Liverpool about to buy PIF.
Daniel's got a better argument than that, and better arguments than that, because associated party transactions in a global world, we opened up the world to be global in business terms for the Premier League. You tell me which associated party transactions you like and which ones you don't like them, because you do business with people. And you do business with business that you're invested in, and you can look at most transactions in the world and they're indexed to one another.
But people don't want to look at football like that, do they? People don't. Fans still don't look at football as businesses like that.
But they are, and what they look. I mean, they do to some extent, because they understand the ramifications of buying footballers and selling footballers and demanding that we've got the best managers. So they understand that to build these wonderful cathedrals and have these wonderful players performing them and cost money, they just don't really want to worry about the machinations, and I understand that. And there's a traditional football fan that just wants to know how good a footballer is. But it has changed.
Well, the Liverpool situation...
Hence the reasons why he's there.
Yeah, football expert. But you have to remember, I mean, the Liverpool Núñez situation is a good example because, first of all, they're not connected to PIF, as far as we know. And yet Liverpool are very happy to take the money from PIF, from Saudi Arabia, to sell Núñez at a probably inflated value compared to what they can get in Europe. Very happy to take that money. And as Spurs would be if they could get an offer for, I don't know, Richarlison, say. I mean, Daniel Levy will sell to Saudi Arabia tomorrow if that offer comes in. So, and neither of those clubs are related parties. Then you've got the situation where Daniel Levy, maybe he was using the wrong terminology, but
isn't the related party there, Stefan, that Liverpool are going to sell Darwin Núñez to a PIF-owned club?
Yeah.
And are then trying to buy Isak from a PIF-owned club.
Okay, but what's the suggestion? Are we saying that there's a conspiracy between Liverpool, PIF and Newcastle to move money around? Surely not. I mean, surely we're not suggesting that, because I would think that there's no evidence to suggest that there is some kind of arrangement that benefits ultimately Liverpool in getting the player that they want. I don't think that is the suggestion. So I think it happens to be slightly surprising, but actually arguably argues that there is a division within PIF between the actions that they take in the Saudi League and the actions that they take for Newcastle. It actually suggests separation, not conspiracy. I would argue. But because I can't see any other way. I mean, obviously, if you don't want to sell Isak, the last thing you do is put Liverpool in funds by buying a player who is probably going to go for 20 million above his market rate, his European market rate, to Saudi Arabia. Because who is going to buy Núñez if Saudi Arabia don't buy Núñez?
You're right, but Liverpool, again, this is just fees that we don't know there. Liverpool are reportedly willing to sell Núñez, or Al Hilal want to buy him for nearly 90 million. That's an overinflated price, isn't it?
What it's making.
It feels that way, doesn't it?
I do want to touch on this. We were going to touch on the last subject, but we didn't have enough time. Manchester United's plans to build their 100,000-seater stadium. Obviously, Old Trafford right now is looking very much Old
Making the
Trafford.
big point of not using any government money, whilst allowing the government to relocate the particular rail tracks in a different way, which is, by the way, using government money.
Yeah, that's... Have you just read the script?
No, I remember it. I remember at the time, because I pay attention to what Jim Ratcliffe says in the presentation at the time, because at the time, don't you remember, he was talking about Man United having no money, and then skipped out of that briefing into another briefing where he told everybody he was going to spend billions of pounds building a stadium.
Yeah, and now they're struggling. I mean, they're being Ratcliffe said 2030 they'd have that new stadium, which is obviously not going to happen.
Yeah.
They're not building that in.
But he's not the first football club chairman to put out a plan of what they're going to do with a stadium as a positive reinforcement of the central messaging, because other messages weren't being grounded very well. So the fact is that a new stadium was part of their principal focus and how they were going to develop it and make sure that Man United was the Wembley of the North. Just needs to be the Wembley of the North. You've got Wembley and then you've got Man United. They're two different things. And there was always going to be the situation where football was going to be held hostage to fortune, because those that have the land that they need are using it as a ransom strip.
Yeah, United value that land at 40 to 50 million.
Well, it's not theirs to value.
Of the land value at 400.
They can value what they want. It's like knocking on someone's door. I value your house at 50 grand. Well, you can bugger off. I value it at 500.
What happens there? I mean, obviously, look, they're going to come to a common ground and they're going to probably meet somewhere closer, I guess, to the middle, but that's a big issue.
Well,
a massive issue.
If indeed that is the situation and you're being held to ransom, it goes towards the build cost, doesn't it? If you talk to Daniel Levy about the building of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, he'll tell you today he couldn't build Tottenham Hotspur Stadium now, because the cost implications of materials and everything that's gone up through the years would mean that the stadium would cost $2 billion to build rather than the $1 billion. Hence Jim Ratcliffe's dilemma. Everything that costs money involves... everything that they have to the component parts of building the stadium are likely to be subjected to various cost implications. And we've already seen that they rejected, didn't they? They rejected the idea they were going to refurbish Old Trafford and went for the more expensive option.
Is that a mistake? In hindsight?
Well, not necessarily, because it depends what you're going to do with it, because it might be that the footprint that you were having at Old Trafford didn't enable all the opportunities that clearly a football club will want to take advantage of. You know, whether you like it or you don't like it, having an F1 track and having all this sort of stuff around a football stadium is the... Go to Miami Dolphins. I was out there recently. I'm watching their stadium. I was watching all the F1 trucks drive away. It's phenomenal.
Incredible. Yeah.
But it is also set in a part of Miami where you've got great big freeways and access to it is easy, whereas getting to a football club in England, because of the geographic situation of this country, is very different. So being able to build stadiums in the middle of nowhere like you can in America and have all the access control so you can get in and out of stadiums much easier is not available in this country. So you've got to create different outcomes. And you know that the funding implication of this is going to have some impact upon Manchester United or people around Manchester United or the people that support Manchester United, because it's not a charitable venture, it's a commercial venture, which is when Jim was talking about originally the idea that it should be government money thrown in was outrageous. Because it's not government money that's required to build a commercial venture. It's Manchester United's money. It's Manchester United as a private enterprise where the shareholders have made fortunes out of the football club. There's no way that anyone was going to tolerate...
How can you want government intervention into building a stadium?
Well, because if you can, and you can use it as part and parcel...
Jobs creation? Is that
that would be the argument.
Yeah.
Sure, they made this... And Andy Burnham was involved in the conversation as well. And I like Andy. I don't agree with a lot of the things he says, but I like him in principle because I think he's quite a committed mayor. I disagree with some of the things he says ideologically, but he was talking about job creation and the reality of the wealth. Those figures never been tested because they were making a case and a big song and dance about there was no government money involved. And then you got this piece of land on the side that was going to be relocated, the railway terminus or where the rolling stock was held, was going to be moved to another part. But that's going to require funding, and it wasn't coming from Man United, it was coming from something else. So there was going to be government money involved. But the idea of everything costing more money will just be visited on the build cost, which has to be funded from somewhere.
How would you judge Sir Jim Ratcliffe as Manchester United owner so far?
I don't understand what he's doing. I don't understand why he's put himself in the way of suddenly taking all the hits. He's been positioned to take the hits, and he's taking the hits. He's a far brighter man than I'll ever be. He's far greater achievements than I'll ever have in his own particular space. But he seems to have been caught up by the bug of lunacy that a lot of us get involved in football clubs and find ourselves subscribing to how we think that we should behave rather than the reality of knowing how we should behave. Sitting there having conversations and talking about things. When he talked about Man United having no money, it was laughable. Yeah. And quite frankly, it should have been actionable because he's an influenceable figure. Whilst he isn't a board, probably gets around it because he wasn't a director of Man United. But this is a listed security on the New York Stock Exchange. You cannot say things for a listed security that aren't true. And it clearly wasn't true that Man United had no money because even by their own submissions, it showed they had about 150 million on call or something in cash. So it was nonsense. And ultimately, if you start making claims about something that influences stock prices, that should be something that the New York Stock Exchange should have sanctioned, and maybe they didn't care and couldn't be bothered with it because it wasn't that big a deal. Man United, as a listed business on the New York Stock Exchange, is an ant in comparison with some of the other businesses that are there. But
I laugh, but it's true.
But I look at it and think some of the things that Jim has put himself in the way of.
But he doesn't need to.
Well, he doesn't need
trying to appease the fans.
He's not appeasing the fans because he's got himself now packaged in the same equation as the Glazers. The Glazers, Jim Ratcliffe, whether it's his money or whether he's leveraged the shares or ultimately it's his own cash, was brought in to fix the elements of what the Glazers had achieved, which is basically profit. Whether you like this deal or not, it is the greatest deal that anyone's ever done in business terms because the Glazers got into Man United for absolutely nothing. Yeah. And if you believe what you dig deeper and find out that actually they didn't even put the 250 million quid in that was part of their contribution, they leveraged that, got in, got everybody else to pay for it, taking whacking great big money out of it, and ultimately got it valued at 7-8 times the price that they never paid in the first place. So it's a fabulous deal. Jim's come in with a new idea of correcting and fixing the problems.
I think he regrets it.
I think he probably. I think it's not difficult to get buyers who regret in football. I can assure you.
Yeah.
Because you go from. I remember the first day I bought Crystal Palace after being in administration for 18 months and reading the forum board saying, "Thank God Jordan's here. Let's give him a couple of weeks before we hammer him." And I'm like, what? Yeah. How's that work? Yeah. But that is football because there is always going to be a situation where somebody needs to be blamed for the short-term malaise of you as a football fan not getting precisely what you want, from cold beer up to best player. It's how it works. Yeah. But Jim must be sitting there scratching his head thinking, I don't need this and that. But he's put himself in the way of it. He's put himself in the way. And the decisions that he's made have not been unreasonable decisions. This idea that they culled the staff and it's a terrible thing to do. Perhaps there was far too many staff scratching around doing nothing all day.
He would have seen that. He has to trim the fat. And
you have to do that. But that's what people will say. It's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It was the bigger picture that needed to prevail. And then he makes ridiculous decisions with Ten Hag. And then he makes ridiculous decisions. Got to have Dan Ashworth. Oh, he's bleeding useless for the task that we wanted for, out the door. And make statements like, well, Newcastle are being difficult. Why won't they just release Dan Ashworth? Because they don't work for Man United, that's why. And they didn't want to release Dan Ashworth to you guys just because you think you've got a God-given right to do what you want. So I think there's a whole raft of things that probably Jim looks back on and thinks, maybe I could have done that differently. Yeah. It's easier to say than when you're in the glare of it all.
Of course. We spoke about sort of Ruben Amorim and the issue he has with United on the field, right? And almost that cruise ship that needs to be turned around, and it's going to be very difficult to do so. How long would it take United to get back to where we perceive United to be? We're of an age, and I group us together, where United were the biggest thing in world football.
But they don't operate in a vacuum, do they? Because you're discounting what's happened to the other football clubs.
Yeah.
And the equation and the equations of the Man City phenomenon and the Liverpool re-emergence as a power in English football, not just winning cups now, they are a powerful football club again, and in the right direction, and a brilliant football club, and always have been. I grew up watching Liverpool and admiring Kevin Keegan and Emlyn Hughes and watching the 1977 European Cup against Borussia Mönchengladbach on TV and wanting an English team to win. And so Man United don't operate in a vacuum. What you've got to try and do is get the best version of Manchester United again, which at this moment in time is nowhere near what they've got, and see how it stacks up against the new forces. Because Chelsea are a force, Liverpool are a force, Arsenal are a force. The change of operation in Arsenal, Man City, the change of operation in Arsenal is palpable. Look at it. Stan Kroenke was the silent billionaire they never heard from, and people accused him of being the only billionaire that they knew of being happy with mediocrity.
Yeah.
And that changed when Stefan Eck decided that potentially Arsenal could be bought for 2 billion quid and wanted to do it post-COVID. All of a sudden, Stan puts his son in, Josh, more hands-on, and all of a sudden Arsenal's spending pattern has gone dramatically in the different direction. So the argument about what Man United can do, it discounts that the other football clubs have a say in it.
They're not standing still, are they?
No. And that's the great thing about the Premier League.
Certainly.
Which is why you mustn't kill it with stupid nonsense like PSR, because what you'll do is you'll turn it into the selling league. The moment you start taxing the Premier League, distributing it differently, introducing ideas that idiot politicians come up that think that everything operates in a vacuum. Oh, well, free to wear. Fine. Eventually, when there's all the money's been sucked out of the Premier League, no one wants to invest in it, it becomes a selling league, and you've got Woolworths instead of Harrods, you'll be happy, will you?
Let's welcome in our chief football correspondent, Alex Crook, with the latest transfer news. Alex, let's start straight away on this Benjamin Šeško situation. We have been taking calls and texts about it. Is he picking United or is he picking Newcastle? Both fans are nervous about what's going to happen in the next 24, 48 hours.
Well, I think that's still the £70 million question, Addy, to be honest. We know that Newcastle have gone back with a fresh offer now worth a guaranteed £70 million up front plus add-ons. I think RB Leipzig are inclined to accept that offer as it meets their valuation, but they're still just holding firm at the moment in case Manchester United come in with a rival bid. The suggestion in Germany has always been that Šeško potentially would favour a move to Old Trafford, but I think this is maybe a difficult one for Manchester United to do. They've already spent over £120 million on Matheus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo. Of the so-called infamous 5 members of the bomb squad, only Marcus Rashford has gone so far and only out on loan, no loan fees. They've saved his wages, but there's no money coming in for that deal. I think Alejandro Garnacho will go between now and the end of the window. Chelsea waiting in the wings, but again, I'm not sure they're in any desperate hurry to pay a hefty transfer fee. The same with Jadon Sancho. I know it's been talked about in terms of Juventus and Borussia Dortmund. So I don't see where United are going to get the money to match this offer. Having said that, never say never. They've pulled it out of the bag before, but I do think we will know definitively, probably by the close of play today, if not early tomorrow, when Eddie Howe and the rest of his Newcastle squad who've been away in the Far East return for training. Yeah,
I can't wait to see them return to training, because we know that Alexander Isak has returned to training. We saw him pull him yesterday with his lovely little G-Wagon, which I thought was quite nice. I'm a big fan of the G-Wagons. What's the latest situation with Alexander Isak? Is there any way in which Eddie Howe can convince him to stay, or is it just a case of if Benjamin Šeško joins the Geordies, then it's a clear case of Alexander Isak joining Liverpool?
That looks the most likely outcome. I know there have been suggestions that Eddie Howe will sit down with his star striker and make another attempt to persuade him to commit his future. But unless they're going to put a £300,000 a week contract on the table, I don't see that's a battle that Eddie Howe can win. I think he is reluctantly coming round to that way of thinking as well. And as you said, Šeško would be a replacement for Isak. Liverpool have made one offer. They're going to bide their time before coming in with a second bid. And I think that will only happen if this Šeško deal does get over the line. I think if Šeško turns down Newcastle, then it would be difficult to sanction the move away for Alexander Isak. But if he signs, then I would expect Isak to end up at Liverpool. And that looks a pretty formidable front line that the champions are assembling by way of defending their title.
We spoke about this yesterday, didn't we? We've been speaking about it at length for ages now, but it does seem to be this domino effect. If one happens, all the others will happen, which could mean Ollie Watkins going United. It could mean Šeško going Newcastle.
Yeah.
Alexander Isak.
Yeah, it could do. I mean, there's this indication, and I think it's more to do with the smokescreen, that if Isak was offered £300,000 a week at Newcastle, that he'd potentially consider it. He'll leave Newcastle.
He's decided what he wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a case of, well, it's half the club's fault. It may well be half the club's fault that they didn't tie him down for 20 years rather than the 3 years they've got left on his contract. The market has dictated certain things, and whether Newcastle could and should have paid the money, I still think when Liverpool came knocking, there was an element of irrelevance about what Newcastle were prepared to pay. The only relevant conversation now is what Newcastle are prepared to sell Isak for, and Liverpool meeting it, or Newcastle getting on with the reality of Isak having to accept his lot. And I keep saying, and I don't care how many abusive, nasty, offensive messages Liverpool fans want to put up on social media, they should pay the price that Newcastle want. He's their player. They're the ones that went and found him. They're the ones that took the punt on him. They're the ones that developed the opportunity. So if Liverpool want to come knocking on his door and unsettling a player, which they have done, then they should pay the price. And I hope Newcastle make them pay the price.
Crookie, what is that price? Liverpool got a bid of 110 million rejected, right? It's almost a bounce back email. That wasn't enough to get through the front door. What is the price for Alexander Isak? Is it as Simon said, 150. Is it 130? What's the fee here, do you think?
Well, that's the dream number as far as Newcastle are concerned, £150 million. But I can say with some confidence, I don't think Liverpool will get near that number. I actually don't think the bid that's been rejected was too far away from what they think Newcastle will eventually accept. It will be a British record fee. I'm pretty sure about that. So it will eclipse what Liverpool have already paid this summer for Florian Wirtz. But when you've got a player who is pushing for the move, obviously it does weaken your bargaining position. And again, I said on breakfast this morning, there's a misconception that this is a situation that really is only reared its head in the last 3 weeks or so. I wrote in March that Liverpool would go big for Alexander Isak this summer. If I knew that, Newcastle would have known that as well. And I think actually you go right back to the start of last season when Paul Mitchell, by all accounts, reneged on a promise that was made previously by the likes of Amanda Staveley to give Alexander Isak a new contract. I think he's been hankering for a move ever since then.
One thing Isak hasn't done is handed in a transfer request. I know there'll be some.
Well, he won't do that.
He's kind of done it, hasn't he, really, by not going on tour. He's gone to Real Sociedad. Are we getting to that stage where he tries to really force it through in the next couple of weeks, where he hands in a transfer request?
Well, that's quite a dramatic step for a player to take, as I'm sure Simon, having been on the other end when he's been in charge of a football club, would testify, because once you formally submit a transfer request, it does hit you financially in terms of bonuses and loyalty payments. That's why it doesn't happen very often.
Do you think he could do that? Are we getting to the stage where he...
Well, I mean, I don't think it's as controversial as people think it is. If you want to leave, then you can't ultimately get... the traction that you want, put yourself in some skin in the game. It's not all a one-way transaction. You've got 3 years left on your contract. What you really should be doing is doing what Newcastle want you to do, which is honour your contract. Because Newcastle aren't hankering to sell this player. They're not sitting there saying, we must sell the player because we need the money and we've got PSR compliance. So they're only reacting to the circumstances of a player that's got 3 years left on his contract. Most people would be saying, hang on a second, Newcastle have done... And I think all this crap that I have to listen to about what players think they've agreed with people and what they've said it's a smokescreen to get around the situation that they're engineering for themselves. I don't think Paul Mitchell, whatever you think of Paul Mitchell, I don't think he's stupid. I don't think he doesn't understand the marketplace that he's in. He might not have been the perfect fit for Newcastle, but you've got Alexander Isak, and all you keep hearing now from players is my understanding of this, my understanding of that, my understanding of this. Well, what is your understanding? I'll tell you what your understanding is what you've bloody signed. That's your understanding. And if you haven't got anything else, and they keep on doing it because it's another way of suggesting that they get out from the responsibility of their own attitude and their own outlook. Like the idea, going back to what Alex is talking about the salary at Newcastle. It doesn't matter if Newcastle offered him 300 grand a week. He still wouldn't sign for them if Liverpool come and buy him. And that's an unfair characterisation because it gets players out from underneath of their own behaviour. It becomes, Newcastle didn't do their job. Paul Mitchell reneged on an agreement. This person didn't do that. Amanda Staveley didn't do this, or Amanda Staveley did do that. And there's never any real... it's all supposition, and it creates an excuse culture for the real criminals in this instance, which are the player and his agent. The player's entitled to leave. If he wants to leave, then he might have to give up some of the loyalty bonuses and some of the consequences of putting in a transfer request. So what? Yeah, you can't have it always, can you? Yeah. Surely you can't.
Yeah, if you want out, you're going to have to face the consequences of wanting
Surely.
Out. Yeah. Away from Newcastle and Liverpool and United, let's talk Everton very quickly, Crookie. We were here the other week when David Moyes was bemoaning the fact that he had done anything or nothing in the transfer window. It looks like Everton are on the verge of agreeing a fee with Chelsea for 25 million for Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, who's not really done much at Chelsea. Good signing, though, for Everton.
I think so. I think it was the wrong move for Dewsbury Hall last summer. He actually went as far as having a medical at Brighton before Chelsea came in and hijacked the deal. And I wonder if he had his time again, would he maybe make a different decision, because he never really got a look in at Chelsea, not in Premier League terms anyway. So, yeah, we expect this deal to go through. Everton also still in talks with Southampton about their teenage midfielder, Tyler Dibbling. And these Jack Grealish whispers about maybe taking him on loan aren't going away either. So I think it's going to be quite an active end of the window for Everton, as you say, on the back of David Moyes voicing his frustration.
I thought he was going to call him David as well there, just to...
He needs a striker, doesn't he?
Skin. Yeah.
Doesn't he need a striker?
He desperately needs a striker.
Well, they've signed Tierno Barry from Villarreal, and they're quite excited about him. But yeah, they do look a little bit short in that department. And I've got to say, Iliman and Jai, keep an eye on him this season. I thought he was excellent in the friendly against Manchester United in the States on Sunday night.
Right, we're always told that we don't talk about transfers in the Championship. We're going to do one right now. What's the latest with Chuba Akpom?
Well, this is absolutely sensational.
Yeah, this is bonkers,
this story, because it's taken so many U-turns over the course of the past 72 hours or so. Originally, he was off to Birmingham City. They'd agreed a loan fee with a £7 million obligation if they were promoted. A medical was booked to take place yesterday. Then his old club Middlesbrough came in to try and hijack the deal. He turned down a return to the Riverside. Still, the Birmingham medical was booked. Then, Monday morning, Ipswich match Birmingham bids. He diverts to Suffolk. He undergoes a medical at Ipswich. He's passed that medical. Birmingham have now come back to the negotiating table and they've offered to sign him permanently this summer. So not a loan deal. I'm told Ajax actually would like to accept that proposal, but it's up to the player if he decides to push on with this Ipswich move or makes yet another U-turn. An absolutely extraordinary story. And it's made all the more fascinating by the fact Ipswich against Birmingham is our championship opener live on talkSPORT on Friday.
There you go. Look at that plug as well from our chief football correspondent, Alex Cook. Alex, final one, Fabio Silva. Now, I saw the name pop up on my screen. I was like, this can't be the same Fabio Silva who was signed by Wolves many moons ago for an inflated price. Dortmund want him.
Again, this caught me by surprise when I got confirmation this morning. Wolves paid a club record £35 million fee for Silva when he was just a teenager. He's only scored 4 Premier League goals. In fact, in the last few seasons, he played more games out on loan for the likes of Rangers and Las Palmas than he has for Wolves. But that isn't deterring Borussia Dortmund. He is a target, I'm told, and Wolves willing to do business for around £22 million. If they can get this one over the line, well, I think they're geniuses when you look at his form.